Happy 4th of July, my brothers and sisters. I'm going to let Mike and Mika break it down for you, some of my studies. Let me explain.
Right now, depending on where you're listening to this, you are probably hearing fireworks.
Oh, definitely. Or at least smelling a neighbor's barbecue.
Right, exactly. I mean, today is July 4th, 2026. And there's this very specific, almost engineered script for today, you know?
Yeah, it's all about celebration, hot dogs, national pride, the usual.
The usual, yeah. But for one Chicago-born, Texas-trained theologian, those explosions in the sky aren't celebrating liberty.
No, not at all.
He actually sees them as marking the expiration date of a 400-year cosmic curse.
Which is just a staggering way to look at it. We are looking at a text today that essentially stares at those fireworks and sees a completely different reality illuminated up there.
It's an intense read.
Highly passionate. It's an excerpt titled Point Blank, The Gross Injustice of Your Praise.
And this comes from the Take It to the Nine podcast, which is brought to you by the Voices of Diaspora. The author and the host, he goes by the Reverend Point Blank Witicizer of Comedy.
Quite a title.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dives is to basically unpack this document. Because, wow, it is dense.
Oh, incredibly dense.
It intertwines American history, sweeping biblical interpretation, and, like we mentioned, this mathematical prophecy of judgment.
Right. And before we get into the mechanics of that prophecy, we really need to set some clear parameters for you, the listener.
Yeah, that's important.
Because this text contains incredibly charged political, historical, and religious commentary. So we are strictly acting as your guides today.
Right. We are not taking sides here.
Exactly.
We're not endorsing the viewpoints presented in the text. Our job is just to impartially pull apart the ideas, the arguments, and, you know, the sheer rhetorical force this author put on the page.
And regardless of whether you agree with his conclusions or not, the way he constructs his worldview, I mean, it's just something you have to hear to fully grasp.
Totally. So to understand this blistering critique he levels at America, we first have to understand the messenger, right?
We do. We have to look at this incredibly unique, almost contradictory lens through which he views the world.
Contradictory is like the perfect word for it. He starts his intro by telling us he is straight from the west side of Chicago.
Yeah, he calls it the Chi Town, or just the Chi.
Right. And he's very explicit that he was molded by survival on those streets. Like, he grew up in the hood, but he says he's not minded, meaning his intellect and his perspective aren't confined by that environment.
So he establishes his street credibility right out of the gate. He wants you to know, hey, I understand raw, unfiltered reality. I know what survival looks like.
But then he doesn't see in Chicago.
No, he moves to Los Angeles, which he immediately renames in his text, naturally.
Yeah, he calls it Follywood with an F.
Oh, Folly, right.
Because he describes L.A. and Hollywood as like fake and cliquish. He views the whole glamour scene as an illusion, a literal folly.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because he goes from the gritty streets of Chicago to rejecting the superficiality of Hollywood to
It's Texas.
exactly Texas, where he gets formal theological credentials.
It's quite the pivot, isn't it?
It's a massive pivot. He spends 4 years studying at a seminary in Texas, and then another 4 years actually pastoring a church there.
So he's not just some guy shouting critiques at religion from the outside.
Oh, no.
He was inside the institution. He was running a church.
He knows the architecture of the institution from the inside out. And he didn't just study Christianity. The text mentions he studied every major religion while traveling globally.
Right. He dug into the core tenets of belief systems all over the world.
And his conclusion after all of that global study is, well, it's incredibly cynical.
Oh, yeah. He claims the principles of every single religion are exactly the same. Like, they all share the same foundation.
But his reasoning for why they look different is wild.
Yeah, he says they just changed the names to protect the guilty.
Which is such a heavy accusation. Change the names to protect the guilty?
Right.
He's implying that institutional religion across the board has been weaponized. That it's been used as a tool to cover up historical crimes, you know, to consolidate power rather than to actually save souls.
It kind of feels like, imagine you're looking at a massive corporate rebrand.
Okay, yeah.
Like, the company is dumping toxic waste, but they changed their logo to a green leaf and call themselves Eco Solutions.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's essentially saying global religions have done the same thing. They slap a new name on the divine to protect the people who are actually causing the harm.
That is a great way to put it. And that profound skepticism of institutions really explains the titles he claims for himself. Because he doesn't call himself a bishop or, a typical reverend.
No, he embraces the witicizer of comedy and the royal jester of truth.
Which is just fascinating.
You know what that reminds me of? The medieval court jester.
Oh, right.
Historically, the jester was the only person in the entire kingdom who was actually allowed to tell the king the absolute brutal truth.
Because anyone else would be punished.
Exactly. If a duke told the king, like, hey, your tax policy is starving the peasants, the duke gets his head chopped off.
Right, instant treason.
But the jester could sing a funny song about the starving peasants, use satire, use performative absurdity, and actually deliver the medicine the king desperately needed to hear.
So the jester weaponizes humor and street-level realism to speak truth to power.
Yes. And point blank is positioning himself as exactly that for modern America.
So what happens when a modern-day prophetic jester, someone who survived the streets, rejected Hollywood, and dissected global religion from the inside out, what happens when he looks at a national holiday like the 4th of July?
Well, he sees an unpayable debt.
Yeah, he really does.
He begins his critique by framing the American narrative entirely through the lens of reparations and, a historical ledger.
He contrasts the historical experiences of different groups. He points out that America gave reparations to the Japanese after the internment camps during World War II.
Right. And he acknowledges reparations given to Jewish people by others as well.
But then he points the finger directly at America regarding black people.
Yeah, he brings up 400 years of slavery. And he doesn't soften the language at all.
No, he goes right at it.
He talks about people being raped, sold, beaten, and having their names stripped away. And he's essentially asking, you want us to forget about that. For 400 years, you want us to celebrate what exactly?
He is shifting the baseline of the entire national conversation there. He asserts that black people fundamentally built America.
Yeah, created its ideals, provided the foundational labor.
And crucially, he mentions that they were heat, meaning they possessed fire, civilization, and culture long before colonists ever arrived.
He explicitly says the colonists came to steal and take over.
Right.
But the conclusion to his historical accounting is what really caught my eye. He doesn't just say America owes a debt. He says America actually can't afford to pay for what it did to an entire people.
Which is a bold claim.
Right. Because, wait, America is the richest country on earth. The GDP is massive. How can he say it literally can't afford to pay?
Because he's not just talking about gross domestic product or, cutting a check. He's framing American exceptionalism as a state of permanent moral and historical bankruptcy.
Ah, I see.
The sheer volume of stolen labor, stolen lives, and generational trauma is so vast that no amount of money could ever balance the scales. The debt is fundamentally unpayable.
Let's try to put the listener in that headspace for a second.
Yeah.
Imagine you throw this massive, lavish birthday party.
Okay.
You buy the multi-tiered cake out of your own pocket. You rent the venue. You spend days putting up all the decorations.
And then the party starts and you get locked outside.
Exactly. You are standing in the cold looking through a window. Everyone else is inside eating your cake, dancing in the room you decorated.
Yeah.
And then someone opens the window, looks out at you shivering, and asks, hey, why aren't you cheering? It's a party.
That perfectly captures the emotional core of his argument about today, July 4th. When he turns his attention specifically to the holiday, his language is just uncompromising.
It really is.
He asks what a Black American should say about this celebration when the legacy of slavery still exists, just, repackaged with fancy names and false history.
He writes that the 4th of July is not for the descendants of slaves. For him, the day just reveals the gross injustice and cruelty which he is a constant victim to.
He calls the holiday a shame.
Yeah, he uses these incredibly visceral phrases like busted liberty and swelling vanity.
Busted liberty is quite the image.
And he describes the sounds of rejoicing as empty and heartless because the injustice persists.
He strips away the mythology of the holiday completely, but, if he stopped there, this would just be a very powerful, very fiery political critique.
But he doesn't stop there.
No, he does.
He takes this entire conflict and elevates it to a cosmic biblical level. He completely rewrites accepted biblical history to reclaim Black divinity.
He states outright that the Garden of Eden runs through Africa and that the first men were Black.
which is intentionally dismantling those Eurocentric visualizations of biblical history that have dominated Western art and culture for centuries.
Exactly. And he's incredibly specific about it. He doesn't just say, oh, the people in the Bible were black. He explicitly lists the disciples.
Right. He writes them all out. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, the son of Zebedee, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot.
He names every single one.
And he declares that they were all black. But, I mean, why list every single name? Why not just say the disciples?
Because by forcing you to sit there and read every single familiar Sunday school name, but picturing them as black men, he completely rewires your mental image of history.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's not just making a theological point, he's forcing a visual reset for the reader. He argues that those in power used God's name and a whitewashed version of this history to usurp power over God's people.
So the theft wasn't just about land or labor. It was the theft of divine lineage.
Precisely.
The colonists didn't just take the physical bodies, they took the spiritual ancestry.
But he doesn't leave his people as permanent victims of this historical and spiritual theft.
Right, here comes the prophecy.
Yeah, he introduces this massive prophecy to say the era of victimhood is over. And it involves a very specific mathematical calculation.
This is the part I really need to break down, because he references the biblical story of God telling Abraham that his seed would be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years.
Yes.
And that is a well-known passage from the book of Genesis.
It is, and Point Blank takes that ancient prophecy and applies it directly to the American timeline.
Right.
He calculates this 400-year curse starting from the year 1619, which, as we know, is widely recognized as the year the first enslaved Africans were brought to the shores of the American colonies.
So if you do the math, 400 years from 1619 brings you exactly to 2019.
Exactly. According to his text, in 2019, the 400-year curse was lifted. The spiritual contract of suffering officially expired.
And because that timeline has ended, he declares that now is the time of judgment.
Yes, the time has come.
But hold on, I am struggling a bit to reconcile the mechanics he uses for this judgment. Because, okay, he is a Texas-trained pastor referencing the book of Genesis.
Right.
But then he brings in karma. He literally writes, karma is a bitch.
He does write that.
He acknowledges that forgiveness is the way to righteousness and that karma understands forgiveness, but he insists that payment is absolutely inevitable. How does a Christian pastor rely on karma, which is a fundamentally Eastern, Buddhist, or Hindu concept? Like, how do you reconcile a Christian God with a karmic universe?
It seems contradictory on the surface, doesn't it? But remember his earlier conclusion? They changed the names to protect the guilty.
Oh, right.
Point Blank doesn't view religious boundaries the way traditional institutions do. He believes the underlying mechanics of the universe are the same, regardless of what label you put on them.
That makes a lot of sense.
By fusing the Abrahamic timeline with the Eastern concept of karma, he is describing a universal law of cause and effect that just supersedes any single denomination.
So it's not a conversation about God sitting on a throne deciding to arbitrarily punish someone.
Exactly.
He uses an analogy to explain this, and it suddenly makes perfect sense. He compares karma to gravity.
Yeah, the gravity metaphor is brilliant.
He says, you will pay just like gravity. You should not have stepped off the building.
Think about the logic of that metaphor for a second. Gravity is emotionless.
Wow. So he's saying it's not a punishment. It's just physics.
Right.
You step off the ledge of slavery. You hit the ground of judgment. Gravity doesn't hate you. Gravity isn't throwing a lightning bolt because it's angry at America.
No, gravity is just doing what it must do because it is a law of the universe.
The 400 years of cruelty are like stepping off a building in 1619, and in 2019, the ground finally rushed up to meet you.
It completely removes the entire debate about whether God is angry or forgiving. Physics doesn't care about your apologies once you are in free fall.
Cause and effect take over.
Exactly. And he concludes this entire thought with a very famous piece of Christian scripture. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers.
Let's unpack principalities and powers in a modern context, because usually people hear that and think of like literal demons or spiritual warfare up in the clouds. What does that mean for America today?
Well, in the context of his critique, principalities and powers refers to systemic structural forces of oppression.
Okay.
He's not saying that judgment is coming for individual citizens who are just trying to live their lives. He is talking about the architecture of society itself.
Like redlining in real estate.
Yes, or the banking systems that denied loans, the legal frameworks that perpetuated inequality long after slavery ended.
It is the invisible scaffolding of the country.
Precisely.
He is saying you aren't wrestling with your neighbor. You are wrestling with a machine that was built 400 years ago to extract labor and wealth from a specific group of people. And now, the karma, the gravity is coming for the machine itself.
It is a profound synthesis of street-level observation, historical critique, and honestly just expansive theology. Let's trace the full arc of what we've unpacked here today.
Yeah, let's recap.
We started with the messenger, Reverend Point Blank, shaped by the survival mindset of Chicago and the rejection of Hollywood's illusions, but all grounded by deep institutional study in a Texas seminary.
And we explored how that unique background forged his uncompromising view of the 4th of July. He sees the American legacy not as a triumph, but as an unpayable moral debt built on 400 years of stolen labor and busted liberty.
While the architects of the nation's true wealth are left outside the birthday party.
Right, exactly. And finally, we broke down how he elevates this critique into a cosmic timeline, reclaiming the divine lineage of biblical history with that visual reset of the disciples.
Applying the Abrahamic prophecy of enslavement to the dates 1619 to 2019.
And concluding that we are no longer waiting for justice. We are living in an era where the cold, inescapable gravity of karma is already taking effect.
Engaging with a text this raw and unfiltered is challenging. But, it is supposed to be. It forces you to look at the historical narratives we all just accept by default.
Definitely. When you hear the fireworks tonight, or when you see the parades, we really want you to ask yourself how engaging with this perspective shifts your understanding of those symbols.
Are they celebrating liberty, or are they masking the sound of a structural collapse?
It's a heavy question. And as we leave you today, we want to give you one final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Something that builds on Reverend Point Blank's text but pushes it directly into our future.
Because the implications of that 2019 expiration date are just massive.
They really are.
If, as Point Blank suggests, 2019 marked the definitive end of a 400-year curse and the beginning of an unavoidable era of cosmic cause and effect, what does that mean for the next 400 years?
Exactly. If the historical ledger of this country is no longer operating under a system of delayed justice, but is now fully subject to the immediate gravity of karma, how might the structures of power and society naturally shift in our own lifetimes?
When the fireworks go off tonight, ask yourself, are we watching a celebration of the past or the friction of a completely new gravity taking hold?
This is the 400-year judgment. Voices of the diaspora. We're returning the receipts. The Reverend Point Blank is in the building. Welcome to CHUCH. We just chillin'. In silence, 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 silence. In silence. Returning the receipts.
Returning the receipts.
Returning the receipts.
Returning the receipts.
This is the judgment.
This is the judgment.
Then silence.
Oh.